Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Varudikacharya Ashtotoda Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Varudikacharya Ashtotoda Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. So I'd like to thank all of you for coming. We have quite a turnout at these classes now, so I'm starting to get feel like the old days. LA. Okay. Narayana Namaskritya Narang Shaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavad Yuttama Shloke Bhaktim Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance on classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 21st day of October 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Canto 4, The Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter 27, Attacked by Chandavega on the city of King Puranjan. in the character of Kalakanya. It's part of the title. And we are on text 11. Ijesha Kratubhi Gorar Dikshita Pashumarkai Devan Pitrin Bhutapatin Nana Kamo Hitabhavan Ijecha Kratubhi Gorar Dikshita Pashumarkai Devan Pitrin Bhutapatin Nana Kamo Hitabhavan Ijecha Kratubhi Gorar Dikshita Pashumarkai Devan Pitrin Bhutapatin Nana Kamo Hitabhavan Ijecha Kratubhi Gorai Dikshita Pashumarkai Ijecha Kratubhi Gorai Dikshita Pashumarkai Devan Pitrin Bhutapatin Nana Kamo Hitabhavan Ijecha Kratubhi Gorai Dikshita Pashumarkai Devan Pitrin Bhutapatin Nana Kamo Hitabhavan Ijecha Kratubhi Gorai Dikshita Pashumarkai Devan Pitrin Bhutapatin Kamo Hitabhavan Ije, he worship. Cha, also. Kratubhi, by sacrifices. Gorai, ghastly. Dikshitaha, inspired. Pashumarkai, where poor animals are killed. Devan, the demigods. Pitrin, forefathers. Bhutapatin, great leaders of human society. Nana, various. Kamaha, having desires. Yatha, like. Bhavan, you. The great sage Narada continued, speaking to King Prachinabarhishat. My dear King Prachinabarhishat, like you, King Puranjan also became implicated in so many desires. Thus he worshipped demigods, forefathers, and social leaders with various sacrifices, which were all very ghastly, because they were inspired by the desire to kill animals. Purport. In this verse, the great sage Narada discloses that the character of Puranjan has been described to give lessons to King Prachinabarhishat. Actually, the entire description was figuratively describing the activities of King Prachinabarhishat. In this verse, Narada frankly says, like you, Yatha Bhavan, which indicates that King Puranjan is none other than King Prachinabarhishat himself. Being a great Vaishnav, Narada Muni wanted to stop animal killing and sacrifices. He knew that if he tried to stop the king from performing sacrifices, the king would not hear him. Therefore, he is describing the life of Puranjan. But in this verse, he first discloses the intention, although not fully, by saying, like you. Generally, the karmis who are attached to increasing descendants have to perform so many sacrifices and worship so many demigods for future generations and satisfy so many leaders, politicians, philosophers, and scientists to make things go on properly for future generations. The so-called scientists are very eager to see that future generations will live very comfortably, and as such they are trying to find different means of generating energy to drive locomotives, cars, airplanes, and so on. Now they are exhausting the petroleum supply. These activities are described in the Bhagavad Gita 241. I'll say, you say. Vyavasayatmaka buddhir ekeha kurunandana bahushakya hinantascha buddhayo vyavasayinam. Those who are on the spiritual path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. Close quote. Actually, those who are in knowledge of everything are determined to execute Krishna consciousness. But those who are rascals, mudha, sinners, dushkritana, and the lowest of mankind, naradamaha, who are bereft of all intelligence, mahyaparita jnana, and who take shelter of the demoniac way of life, asuram bhavam ashritaha, I think it's asurim bhavam ashritaha, are disinterested in Krishna consciousness. As such, they become implicated and take on so many activities. Most of these activities are centered around the killing of animals. Modern civilization is centered around animal killing. Karmis are advertising that without eating meat, their vitamin value or vitality will be reduced. So to keep oneself fit to work hard, one must eat meat, and to digest meat, one must drink liquor, and to keep the balance of drinking wine and eating meat, one must have sufficient sexual intercourse to keep fit to work very hard like an ass. There are two ways of animal killing. One is in the name of religious sacrifices. All the religions of the world, except the Buddhists, have a program for killing animals in places of worship. According to Vedic civilization, the animal eaters are recommended to sacrifice a goat in the temple of Kali under certain restrictive rules and regulations and eat the flesh. Similarly, they are recommended to drink wine by worshipping the goddess Chandika. The purpose is restriction. People have given up all this restriction. Now they are regularly opening wine distilleries and slaughterhouses and indulging in drinking alcohol and eating flesh. A Vaishnavacharya like Narada Muni knows very well that persons engaged in such animal killing in the name of religion are certainly becoming involved in the cycle of birth and death, forgetting the real aim of life, to go home back to Godhead. Thus the great sage Narada, while instructing Srimad Bhagavatam to Vyasa Muni, condemned the karma kanda food of activities mentioned in the Vedas. Narada told Vyasa, and this is in the beginning in the 5th chapter, 1st canto, where he's explaining to him why he should write the Bhagavatam. Tugupsitam dhamma kote nushashata sabhava raktasya mahan vitikramaha yan vakyato dhamma iti taraksito namanyate tasya nivaranam janaha. Translation. The people in general are naturally inclined to enjoy, and you have encouraged them in that way in the name of religion. This is verily condemned and is quite unreasonable. Because they are guided under your instructions, they will accept such activities in the name of religion and will hardly care for prohibitions. Bhagavatam 1.5.15. Srila Narada Muni chastised Vyasadeva for compiling so many Vedic supplementary scriptures, which are all intended for guiding the people in general. Narada Muni condemned these scriptures because they do not mention direct devotional service. Under Narada's instructions, direct worship of the Supreme Personality of the Godhead, as described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, was set forth by Vyasadeva. The conclusion is that neither the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, nor his devotee ever sanctions animal killing in the name of religion. Indeed, Krishna incarnated himself as Lord Buddha to put an end to animal killing in the name of religion. Animal sacrifice under the name of religion is conducted by the influence of tamoguna, the mode of ignorance, as indicated in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 18:31-32. Yaya dharmam dharmam cha karyam cha karyameva cha ayathavat pajanati buddhi sa parta rajasi adharmam dharmamiti ya manyate tamasavata sarvatang paditangscha buddhi sa parta tamasi. Translation. That understanding which cannot distinguish between the religious way of life and the irreligious, between action that should be done and action that should not be done, that imperfect understanding, O son of Pritha, is in the mode of passion. That understanding which considers irreligion to be religion and religion to be irreligion under the spell of illusion and darkness, and strives always in the wrong direction, O Partha, is in the mode of ignorance. Those who are involved in the mode of ignorance manufacture religious systems for killing animals. Actual dharma is transcendental. As Lord Sri Krishna teaches, we must give up all other systems of religion and simply surrender unto him. Sarva dharmam parityajya. Thus the Lord and his devotees and representatives teach the transcendental dharma, which does not allow animal killing at all. At the present moment, it is the greatest misfortune that in India, many so-called missionary workers are spreading irreligion in the name of religion. They claim an ordinary human being to be God and recommend meat eating for everyone, including so-called sannyasis. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandjana shalakaya chakshu unmilatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So, quite a rich purport here in verse. And so Narada Muni is revealing what has been kind of clear before, but he's revealing it explicitly to King Prachina Barishad. And that this Paranjan is a stand-in for him. In other words, he's describing Paranjan's attachments and his entanglements and his fate, because he wants to try to reform King Prachina Barishad. King Prachina Barishad, who is the glorious father of the Prachetas, who are busy meditating, singing the song of Shiva for 10,000 years underwater while this is all being spoken, he has gotten himself entangled in performing all of these material sacrifices, which are mentioned here in the purport distinctly, for the purpose of going to heaven and enjoying. It's not really qualitatively different, in essence, than what we see going on all around us. People working very, very hard, making sacrifice to get an education, which today means like mostly to go into serious debt, in the hopes that you'll get a better life next time and so forth, or anything. It's the same idea. So there's a part of the Vedas that deal with that, the Karma Kanda section. And as Krishna says, mostly the Vedas deal with these three modes, Trigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistrigunya Bhavarjana. But you, Arjun, should be transcendental to the modes. Because if you recall in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjun's argument in the beginning, in the first chapter, he was reciting the Vedas. He was saying that, I kill all these soldiers and the women will become unprotected, they'll be Varna Sankara, and then the sacrifices won't be performed for the forefathers, and I'll be the cause of it. In other words, his gut emotion was he did not want to be responsible for killing his glorious teacher and grandfather and all his other friends and relatives there. And he employed this argument from the Vedas to support it. But it wasn't very satisfying for him either. And so in the beginning of the next chapter, he says, Karpa nidosho pahata svabhava prichamitam dharma samuda cheta. That my consciousness is bewildered about what real dharma is. Now this principle of dharma is very significant. It comes up is essential point here. Because in the name of religion, someone is performing some materialistic sacrifices to go to heaven. I can't help but refer to the present, irreligion, and that's being propagated as religion in the name of prosperity theology. That if you're rich, it must mean that you have God's, blessing, and if you're poor, well, that means that you don't have His blessing. Is that the teaching of the Bible? If the poor will inherit the earth, isn't it? Anyway, it's a similar thing of corrupting religion in the name of materialistic motive, and that's kicked out at the beginning of Bhagavatam. As we hear here, and we should understand and read in the 5th chapter, 1st canto, the Bhagavatam was written under the instructions of Narada after he's chastising his disciple Vyasadeva. He got too much into writing the Vedas and all the different literatures without enough straight bhakti. So people could, as it explains in that 5th chapter, they won't even care. This verse here, Jugupsitam. I mean, that's abominable. In other words, they won't care for the restrictions in what you've written, and they'll just go for the sense gratification. And that's what happened. They were using the Vedas as an excuse for opening slaughterhouses, meat eating, and just maybe going through the motions of the sacrifice. In other words, it was corrupted. And so therefore you have to write something wholly and solely about devotional service, Lord Sri Krishna, the absolute truth, no compromise, no animal slaughter in the name of going to heaven and things like that. So that's what the Bhagavatam is, and that's why we're hearing this in the Bhagavatam. So King Prachitamarta is Puranjan, but we're all Puranjan. What does Puranjan mean? It means the person living in the city of the body. That's us, the 9 gates, city of the body. And in so many ways, ordinary material life is paralleling what Puranjan is doing. I mean, you remember what's happened. He got, he went out. He was seduced by his material intelligence, in the form of this beautiful woman who he meets in the forest. And he seduces. He thinks he's seducing her, but she's actually seducing him. And then he sets up and he gets married, And I think before describing all his children, is that he went out into the forest to hunt, So he was restless. So he thinks from the mode of passion down to the mode of ignorance. And now they're just shooting wildly and killing so many animals. Horrible, ghastly. It's not any excuse of sacrifice. And finally he comes back. He's ignored his wife. Takes a shower, takes something to eat, takes a little rest. Now he's ready to enjoy. Where is she? So he goes, he finds she's lying on the ground. So he has to pacify her, and he speaks all these words of submission. I'm your slave, I'm your servant, like that. So then then she is pacified, he pacifies her, and then they have sex. And then he just settles into that mode, and is in thousands of children and grandchildren. The whole thing expands into a huge entanglement. And so Narada Muni is now revealed, and this is what you're also doing, King Prachitamarta. You should. He doesn't say this, but really, he should be more like his sons, who really listen to Lord Shiva, a wonderful song of devotion, pure devotion, and they're chanting that. So there's many lessons here for us, and the big one here is that religion can in the name of religion, so many things are going on. Now, Prabhupada at the end of this chapter, or end of this long purport, he refers to, I'm not going to name the organization either, since Prabhupada didn't, but what they're involved in the mode of ignorance. They manufacture religious systems for killing animals. Actual Dharma is transcendental. Now, where do we learn that? Right at the beginning of the Bhagavatam. Not only do we learn at the second verse that here you're not going to get any cheating religion. This is cheating religion. Why? Because the gold standard of what Dharma is given right in the Bhagavatam at the beginning of the second chapter. With verse number 6. Savai pungsang paro dharmo yato bhakti radhokshaje. Real Dharma is that which evokes pure bhakti, loving devotion for adhokshaja. It's a name for Krishna, which means he is beyond the range of material senses and mind. And then it qualifies that. Well, that's what I'm doing. I love God. I go to church every Sunday. Ahoitakiya patidata. The key, it says ahoitakiya. In other words, no material motivation. Yeah, churchianity, right? In other words, there's no compromise. It's anyabhilasha free of all personal motivation, simply for the purpose of awakening one's dormant but natural loving devotion to Krishna. And to really be satisfying to the self, it has to be uninterrupted. In other words, it's not once a week. It's every moment. That's the standard. That's Bhagavatam's standard of Dharma. You see? And then he goes on to explain it, and eventually leads, if you read that series from 6 to 21, it's an essential instruction. So after reading that, and and Prabhupada's quoting those verses all the time in his lectures, and then I had this idea. Well, like we have the teachings of Queen Kunti. That was done during Prabhupada's time, I believe, and the teachings of Lord Kapila, I think, were done right after 1978, something like that. But these are wonderful books. Prabhupada lectured so extensively on these important verses, and he has the purports. So you take the purports and you take selections from the lectures, and you make a nice book, mass distribution book. So I said, well, why don't we do a book of these verses? Starting with Savai Pungsang Paro Dharma It's just a wonderful lesson all the way. So we did that. We took, just like with the other books, and we produced this Dharma, the Way of Transcendence book, which was distributed for a while in America, but mostly now in India. You find it, they print it, keep it in print. We'll see it on the shelf sometime here. So what does he say there? Now we chant before each class, not Prayasha Bodhreshu, Nityam, that's from the series, you know. But he's explaining there that, you know, it's not really pure Dharma is beyond the range of this Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. He's dealing with those four in that lesson. And what is Dharma in that context probably called Dharma religiosity, which is kind of a clue that it's not really pure religion, because the goal is Artha. If I'm very religious and I go to church every week and I pray sincerely to God, you know, and I'm strict, I'm ethical, I'm moral, you know, then we'll be prosperous. You know, it's called the Protestant ethic. It was very prominent in America in the early days. And then what do we have with Artha? Okay, then we can have sense gratification, you know, peace and prosperity. So Dharma, Artha, Kama. Dharma, Artha, Kama. Now, what's wrong with that, if it's just restricted to those, is that when you build up this big technology and the scientific, all these things, then what do we need religion for? You know, let's just go for Artha and Kama, right? So many things are being produced. We got, you know, massive cow slaughter, you know, and we can put meat on everybody's table, and you know, it's a law, because the people who have all the money, they can control the laws a lot. You cannot go into those slaughterhouses and take pictures and have some propaganda against meat eating. Because if people really saw what goes on, they say, oh my God, I'm contributing to that? Yeah. Because they had some reports, people who got in there and said, oh no, we can't have this, so they made a law. In other words, the reality of the whole thing is so horrific that to keep up the facade, oh yeah, where does meat come from? It comes from that section of the supermarket over there in the back. That's as far as they go. I mean, I'll be honest, you know, I grew up in that culture until that's 25 years. I was in and this you go and you know, and it's just not, you don't think, that's the point, it's a mode of ignorance. You don't think of the implications of your activity. You don't connect this slab of a hamburger with a living, breathing, sentient being that was suffered tremendously for that. And if everyone did, just like kids, Prabhupada tells this story. He's showing how some people can get so low that they take pleasure in giving pain to others. We have this story of Narada Muni, you know, and the hunter and everything. And so, but here's this real life thing. Prabhupada gives a story when I think he saw this when he was in Calcutta. I'm not sure what period of his life. And there was a guy there who was maybe he was a butcher or just had some chickens in the back, you know. And so he was slaughtered the chicken. He had his little son with him. And you know how it's true. It's kind of a cliche, but it's true. If you chop a chicken's head off, it'll still stay active for a little while. You know, it's horrible. So he slaughtered this chicken, and the chicken was running around, and the kid was screaming and yelling and crying, just like a 3-year-old kid, you know. And the guy was laughing. He was laughing. He was laughing at the chicken, and then he was laughing at his son. And then he said, "What's the problem? You know, this is." In other words, he was trying to condition his kid to be as cruel and as heartless as he is. And so this is what's going on in society when people get unmoored from actual religion, and there's no leadership. The king or the leader, the executive head, what to speak of going down through the families and everything, really training us in religion. Because the tendency is, what is that verse? Loke vivaya mishamadya seva. That's the only line I know, but we'll probably quote it. And it says, in human society, the tendency is these three things. Doesn't mention gambling, but illicit sex, meat eating, and intoxication. If there's no guidance, it'll just naturally devolve to that. Because we have an animal nature. We've come through all these animals, and without proper guidance. So the most important thing is education and knowledge in society, giving real knowledge. And that's why ISKCON, Prabhupada conceived it as really an educational institution. First of all, educating the members to reform their lives, revolutionize their lives and live properly. And then they become agents for educating others. and for, drawing them into. And the education then also involves the practice. Because without the practice of bhakti, the modes are too powerful, especially in this age. So that's what and these classes are so important. I would insisted on them. I'm supposed to have an evening class too, and we try to hold that together. So what's happening here? Now at the end here, Prabhupada talks about, the key is dharma, or adharma in the name of dharma. And that's spoken of in the Bhagavad Gita in the 18th chapter. Different modes of nature, and intelligence in the mode of ignorance. It's kind of almost an oxymoron, but there it is. It sees everything backwards. Like people say, you guys are brainwashed, and you're trying to crimp everyone else's enjoyment. And they see us as the enemy sometimes. We see the reality is that all these poor people are suffering because of ignorance. This is very nicely explained in the Nectar Devotion at the beginning. This was brought up, I think, yesterday. So that ignorance, by ignorance, you inevitably respond to your lower nature, and you perform so many sins. You may not know they're sins, but they are, and sin produces suffering. So by ignorance, you act sinfully, and the sinfully produces the suffering, and you don't know where the suffering comes, so you blame someone else. You're doing it. Those people over there coming in the country, that's why we're suffering. This is how human society devolves. So Krishna comes in order to reinstitute Dharma. That's right in the Gita, right? Famously. Why does he care? Because he cares about us. We don't care about him. We forgot all about him. I mean, underneath we do, and we revive it. But basically we forgot all about God. We forgot all about everything. So what do we care about? Ourselves, body, and the extensions. I very much care about my family, and protect them at all costs. And then you identify with a society or a nation, those who look like us, who speak the same language, otherwise out. This is all coming from the mode of ignorance, and it just creates tremendous suffering in society and degradation. So this is the revolutionary movement. That's also part of Narada Muni's instruction, right at the beginning there. Tad Bhagvisargo Janataga Viplavo Yasmin Pati Shlogam Abadnapatyapi. He says that the words, you know what a Bhagvisarga is? A book. It's a creation of words. Sometimes spoken, in other words, speaking or printing, but somehow or other getting the message out. Those words which glorify Krishna, honestly, which are glorifying by his devotees. That's another important caveat. And the process of devotional service, they are meant to bring about a revolution in society. This misdirected society. Janata aga means a sinful society. Viplava, capsize the boat. That's what Viplava means. That's revolution, And even if they're imperfectly composed, they're not written so well, then still those who are honest and who know the value of things, they accept them, repeat them, and learn from them. This was a very important verse. If Prabhupada was inspired by this verse when he's writing his Bhagavatam, which is a tremendous austerity. All alone with a old typewriter, typing them with 2 fingers, and, for hours and hours and hours every day for months and months at a time. No money to print it. Somehow he raised the money to print the first volume. With the first volume, he got a donation to print the second volume. It took him like 3 or 4 years to get those 3 books printed. And then he had his ammunition. So, but when he's getting, the inspiration to do it, this verse was so important. Why? Because it says, it brings about a revolution in society. Even if it's imperfectly composed, it says even if every verse is imperfectly composed, that's what it says. Still, those who are honest, they'll accept it, they'll repeat it, they'll learn from it, they'll, like that. So Prabhupada took this verse, he put it in his preface. The preface of a book explains how the book came to be written. And this is how Prabhupada says, I know that this will be imperfectly done because, English is my second language, basically he's saying, he says like that. Still, it's so important, so all important, that I'm inspired, to do this, even if I'm perfectly composed, that honest people will accept it like that. And he wrote the whole thing. And, it was so difficult at first. I mean, he's walking around, there's Srila Prabhupada, purest of the pure. he's walking around in New York in Times Square. In those days, it wasn't Disneyfied, with porn shops on each side, and he's trying to find a bookshop that maybe he'll take his books. And somehow he's getting enough so that he can pay his rent and still exist, And of course, then he had made some contacts. We know the whole story. But this was his inspiration. He didn't feel like he could come until he had those books in hand. And once he had those, that printing, he was able to do it. I'm sorry? Times Square. Times Square, I grew up in the New York area. And there's always a place to go, if you're not, try to sneak in if you're underage, there were porn movies going on, It was a really low part of the city. But it was allowed, a lot of business was going on. At a certain point, the city government decided, well, let's make it suitable for families to come, I mean, I think their real motive is to increase the traffic, Anyway, so they redid the whole thing. They don't have the porn movies there anymore, they just have the softcore porn movies, the movies that they show everybody. And so that's what happened. That's why I say, like Disney's for families. You're not going to find any pornography there. You'll find rides for kids and things like that, wholesome, So but in Prabhupada's time, it was, and it's, like that. More mode of ignorance. Disneyfied. Yeah, Disneyfied. I made it up. You all understand what it means, right? So this principle, what the Bhagavatam is really meant to do. What is Dharma? First of all, why is it important enough for us to follow Dharma? Because otherwise, nunam pamatta kudate vikarma, then you're sure to perform sinful activities and suffer like anything. Dharma is meant for upliftment of each individual in society and society as a whole. That's why the great kings, like we see, whether it's Parikshit himself or King Prithu we read about, Yudhishthira is also spoken of here and others, they're very concerned that people are following, the Dharmic rules. And what happened? When Parikshit goes around and there's Dharma personified being tormented. By who? Kali. Right? The age of Kali means that our Dharma becomes prominent and rules, So he felt, he's ready to chastise him and eventually he gave him some spots where he could stay, where there was meat eating and gambling, intoxication, and gold, especially gold, which facilitates that. But basically, he held off the age of Kali. But it's natural; it has to come. So the Bhagavatam is also meant to fight back against the forces of Kali. What is that verse? Krishne Sudhama Upagade Dharma Jnanadi Bisaha Kalo Nastadishamesha Puranako Dunodita. That Krishna himself, when he came, he was a force for Dharma. He annihilated so many demons. He spoke the Bhagavad Gita. He set up Yudhishthira as a king. In other words, promoting Dharma and get rid of adharma. As he says, Paratanaya Sarunam Vinashayata Dushkritam Dharma Sangstapanataya. Sambhavami Yuge, I come again and again and again. So, but Krishna, he only stayed for 125 years. Then he goes back. And when he takes Dharma and Gyan with him, in other words, he leaves so many representatives in the book, but when we have to support the Dharma, in other words, the people who are left have to take advantage of the gifts that he gave in order to maintain Dharma in society. And Kali Yuga, is progressing and has progressed. And so it's incumbent on us, who are followers of Srila Prabhupada and followers ultimately of Krishna or Chaitanya, to also lead dharmic lives, know what to do, what not to do. Remember, that's if you go back to the Gita, you'll see that's part of the problem of the mode of ignorance, is that you think just the opposite. That it's like the thing with the day and the night in the Gita. Oh, I always give the example of this block, right? Just like 50 feet down the road, you got the pizza bar, right? And then you got the Hare Krishna temple. So the question is, what am I going to go? It's Saturday night or it's Sunday night. Am I going to go to the Hare Krishna temple, or am I going to go to the pizza bar and watch the game and drink beer and get some pizza? That's the question. Your destiny as a person is keying on that question. So those who are fortunate, who have got the touch of pure devotion, from Srila Prabhupada and whole, they've read a book or they know a devotee, they're chanting, whatever. They come down the block, and they wouldn't think ever of going to the pizza bar. They've come from the temple. But the people on the way to the pizza bar, they're walking by. Oh, that's the Hare Krishna temple. Just keep going, and you get it. It's all a question of your consciousness as to what you are attracted to, and then you tend to get confirmed in that. You have to, So our job is to somehow intervene and to be representatives and give people another idea of what's good and what's right and what will help them in their life and the actual reality and which is what Narada Muni is doing right here, the Bhajana Parishad. Here's the fate, a lot of suffering, rebirth. Now again, eventually Puranjan is going to take birth again, and eventually he's going to meet the Super Soul. So it kind of has a happy ending, right? But that's because he has some touch of devotion. But King Bhajana Parishad is now being purified by Narada Muni, and he's going to ask all kinds of questions. So we're Puranjan, and we can also be saved by taking the right steps and hearing from authorities and trying to incorporate those principles in our lives. That's ultimately what it is. Otherwise, we'll fall victim in this Kali Yuga. It's very hazardous. There's a verse in the Chaitanya Chandramrita. There's a beautiful book about Lord Chaitanya by Pravodhananda Saraswati, who was Gopal Bhatta Goswami's uncle. Very learned, very good musician, and he took sannyas from Lord Chaitanya, and I think he lived in Vrindavan, right, and wrote many books. So this is a book glorifying the moon of Lord Chaitanya, Chandramrita. Let's see if I can remember it. Yeah. Kala Kalir, Bolina Indriya Vaidi Varga. Shri Bhakti Marga hi Akantaka Koti Rudha. Ha Kriyame Vikalakki Mahankaromi Chaitanya Chandanani Yadinajiki Pankaroshi. So he's addressing, each chapter has a different title, and this one, the author laments his pitiable condition. It's just like Prahlad also sometimes, in Narottam Das Thakur Bhaktivinoda, they'll take the position of conditioned soul and say, oh, I've wasted my life, I've done this, I don't have a drop of devotion to you, like that. So here he's saying, it is the age of Kali, Kala Kalir, and my enemies, my senses, have become very powerful. Bolina Indriya Vairi Varga. And the path of bhakti, Shri Bhakti Marga, Kantaka Koti Ruddha, that path is overgrown by so many brambles and thorns of false philosophies and misguiding, so-called leaders. This Prabhupada's talking about that. Irreligion in the name of religion. Kriyami vikalakta mahankaram. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do, O Lord Chaitanya, if you do not now pour your mercy upon me? If you do not show me mercy. There's several other verses like that I can share with you if you're interested. So this is our position. We're helpless here. If we don't have the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and his representatives, what are we going to get? We just at sea here, and we'll be influenced by this age, and we'll end up performing sinful activities and suffering like anything, and spoil a human form of life, or at least since we've done a little Krishna consciousness, we're postponed. The whole thing is postponing our deliverance. Why postpone? Let's go back to God in this very lifetime. This is what Prabhupada would always encourage us. We really believe that. Maybe we were a little bit naive, but Prabhupada gave us the means to do it. And if you stay strict, you can actually go back to God. But the wonderful thing is, Nehaba Krimanashosti Pativayana Vijate, in this practice, there's no loss and no diminution. So whatever we can accomplish in this life, and we should try to accomplish as much as possible toward pure devotion, that'll stand us in good stead for the next life. But the way this Kali Yuga is progressing, let's not take any chances. Let's go back to Godhead, So these instructions are all very important for us. And I'm going to just read this translation again, and there can be a lot of ideas and comments from this rich purport. The great sage Narada continued, like dear King Prachina Parhishat, like you, King Puranjan, King Puranjan also became implicated in so many desires. Thus he worshipped demigods, forefathers, social leaders with various sacrifices, which were all very ghastly because they were inspired by the desire to kill animals. Comments or questions? Go ahead, Boo.
A nice question for Prometheus.
Wow. The original? The original? Go
White
ahead.
Bear. Are you 100% certain that 100% of the Vedas coming through your founder are correct? Do you allow for any possibility of being wrong?
Well, Srila Prabhupada gave us the essential books of the Vedas, meaning the books that are following. The Srimad Bhagavatam, essentially Bhagavad Gita, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. What I can tell you, because I have experienced that in the course of producing those books, first of all, he relied on his disciples. You know, how do we get so many books? It's superhuman. That someone in a period of 12 years could write basically, 50 plus major volumes of books of heavy philosophy and, translation and everything like that. So Prabhupada relied on his transcribers, his editors, his producers, the typists and everyone else, to produce these books. And it's not that he wasn't involved. He would sometimes review, but basically he, relied on them. And so in the course of doing that, sometimes mistakes crept into the books. Different sources, typists. I mean, I could give you 6 classes, on how these mistakes entered in. Just the typing. Just this one word here. It's not a big deal, but there's a sentence here where actually religion is, here it is. Right here. Actually, Dharma is transcendental. So what it's supposed to be is actual Dharma is transcendental. It's not a big difference, but it's Prabhupada said, edit for force and clarity. This is in a letter to Hayagriva. And if you go through, you can look at the original Bhagavatams, and you'll find that, it's Prabhupada's English, and he was doing the editing and writing. And so as he wrote there, that is, it's not his original language. So he gave it over to Hayagriva to edit and make it smooth for force and clarity. But Hayagriva wasn't steeped in all of the intricacies of the philosophy, and so some mistakes crept in there, which we're trying to handle now. So that may not be what you have in mind, but that's the reality. But the fact is that the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam itself, and all these are flawless. And they're pristine. And it's not a question of there being a mistake. Does Krishna make mistakes? Does God make mistakes? These are coming through. I mean, Krishna speaking the Bhagavad Gita, right? Yeah, I know everything in the past, everything in the present, everything in the future. So it's a flawless presentation. And the same thing holds true for the Bhagavatam and all the books, because they're channeling the flawless source of knowledge, which is Krishna. So that's our faith. Now, the thing is that as we're reading here, the Vedas also speak to those who aren't ready to take up pure devotional service. And that's why they're Trigunya Vishaya Veda, is that they deal with the modes of nature sometimes. The idea is to, keep you on the side of Vedic culture and self-control. And Prabhupada points out here, why do we have why are there so many instructions? Okay, you want to eat meat? Well, sacrifice a goat once a month, and you say these prayers, and one of the word mamsa, okay, you can, I'm eating you, and then you can eat me in the next life. And Prabhupada says, well, why should I do all this? In other words, it's meant for restriction. Marriage means restriction on sex life. It's a holy sacrament. It's not just animal propensities, the degradation. So part of the Vedas are for that. And that's why Vyasadeva was chastised by Narada Muni for dealing too much with those relative parts of the Vedas and allowing people to use them for an excuse for sense gratification. That's what the purport is about. So therefore write the Bhagavatam, wholly and solely dealing with the transcendental, nature of the soul, relation to Krishna, Krishna Bhakti, and his incarnations, the process of devotion, all of that thing. That's the whole purpose of Bhagavatam. And that's why the impersonalists won't comment on it. They'll comment on the Vedanta Sutta where you can screw out some material or impersonal thing. So yes, we have faith that the presentation is flawless and that Srila Prabhupada, is pure, and that his presentation is, perfect for taking us back to Godhead. So your answer is yes. Well, sorry, that was kind of a long yes, but I felt it's an important topic. Okay, all glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.